Dragon Quest XI just came out in the West, and being a huge fan of the series myself, I thought I should commemorate it with a video about the series as a whole, specifically about how Dragon Quest managed to keep most gameplay elements the same while continuing to be amazing and beloved internationally for 11 plus games. I mean, I really haven't seen people complain about the Dragon Quest series being repetitive, and in fact, I've seen so many people just craving for the next game in the series, especially in the West where we have been continually getting shitted on for the longest. On the other hand, we have Final Fantasy, which feels a little similar to Dragon Quest, with the difference being that Final Fantasy is always trying to change and innovate the turn-based wheel with things such as ATB, whatever Final Fantasy 13 was doing, and getting rid of that turn-based crap altogether. And while this constant change-up of the tried and true is appealing to a lot of people, it's not always well received. Never forget how much hate Final Fantasy 13 used to get. Alright, let's get this video over with so I can get back to Dragon Quest XI. And what better way to start than with arguably the biggest part of any Dragon Quest game, the compelling story and world building. I won't be spoiling any stories, but in comparison to other JRPGs, Dragon Quest has some of the most subversive and interesting stories I've seen. Compare this to the mainline Pokemon games, which feel like the same story over and over again. While sometimes fun, this makes it more tiring as time goes on. But how does all this affect gameplay? Here's how I see it. When the story and the world capture you, everything else is enhanced. Things are lit with a brighter tint because you've bought into the game world. I'm not saying the story hides the gameplay or it doesn't hold up on its own. If that were the case, I don't think the games will have the critical acclaim they enjoy. See, the combat itself is actually enjoyable because it's refined to the point where it feels so good to play that it doesn't even matter that it ends up being somewhat the same. The developers have had many years and many games to figure the gameplay out on a fundamental level and to figure out what's needed in order for it to feel fun. And it definitely shows. There's a reason why this series is so influential to a plethora of games. While other series recently have started to move away from their roots in favor of adapting to the ever-changing gaming landscape, Dragon Quest opted to keep its core elements and continue to build upon it. Because of that, it's able to change things up, but not in ways that completely uproot tradition. For example, one of the biggest additions was in Dragon Quest V, where you can capture monsters to help in battle. Sound familiar? Another mechanic, tactics in Dragon Quest IV, is something I highly doubt isn't a direct influence for Gambits in Final Fantasy XII. These changes add up without subtracting from their core game, and as a result, each game feels fresher yet still familiar. They add a level of complexity that allows the games to continue to be challenging, which makes them more rewarding. But I think every game can have complexity depending on how you look at it. However, if a game is too easy, you might not end up utilizing the game's cool mechanics because you'll never have to. Look at Pokemon. Interesting elements like IV training and natures don't mean diddly squat because the base game is so easy to beat. And if I want depth in my combat from Pokemon, I might as well use Pokemon Showdown. In Dragon Quest, I always find myself utilizing all the different features the game has to offer to scrape through some battles, especially the bosses. And from this, I get a more complete experience when dealing with the gameplay. But you know, what is life without experimentation? You know, they say variety is the spice of life, and that's why we have spin-offs. This is, of course, not exclusive to Dragon Quest, but it's still integral to the series' success. Spin-offs are like those experimental ideas that you really want to try out, but you know might not be well received as part of the main titles. I mean, look at that weird Wii game, the Minecraft clone, the Musou game, and so on and so forth. All vastly different from each other. But what does this have to do with staying the same? The biggest way, I believe, is it allows the developers to test and refine new ideas, even if they don't make it back to the mainline games. For example, in Dragon Quest Monsters, a big thing that was added was the ability to breed monsters, which ended up being a highlight of those games. From there, it kept getting built upon in its own set of games, and as a result, they aren't in the mainline, which is kind of a good thing. As it got its own chance to flourish, it didn't need to be packed into the main game to see if it would work out. If it did, I personally believe it would start to make the games feel more cumbersome and cluttered, which doesn't sound like a fun time to me. And all of this was to say that Dragon Quest is an amazing series with a lot of amazing things going for it, and its 11th installment is no exception. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like or comment, and have a good day.